Hey everyone, it is Angus from Stryd. Happy Wednesday. I'm coming to you live from the Stryd headquarters here in Boulder, Colorado, and we are talking running and data to help you get the most out of Stryd and have your best run yet. And specifically, we are talking about the Stryd Footpath feature enabled by Stryd Duo. So the topic today, we're going to be doing footpath analysis on fatigue and warm-up trends. We have a really exciting presentation for you today, talking about some data, looking at data in new ways, some new analysis strategies that we've been working on here in the Stryd headquarters, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So first, to take a step back, we all know the groundbreaking use cases of the Stryd Footpath enabled by Stryd Duo. So number one, injury. Track your recovery process through quantifying those subtle changes in your Stryd Footpath as you recover from an injury. Number two, drills. Quantify and visualize the impact of drills on your Stryd Footpath to determine whether they are providing the intended benefits and all that work is paying off. Number three, footwear. Observe how different shoe choices reshape your footpath and contribute towards and impact your running. Number four, performance. Visualize your footpath to determine personalized indicators of how your footpath changes as your performance transforms. And finally, fatigue, the one we're going to be primarily focused on today, is monitor how and when you fatigue in and across your runs so you can tailor your training to combat that fatigue and run stronger for longer. And to analyze the footpath, we're going to be following this three-step process I've talked about in previous videos. Number one, make those accurate apples-to-apples comparison. This gives us a great baseline to learn from our data. Number two is understand how your Stryd Footpath responds to changes, variables such as incline, speed changes, duration as you run longer, and other variables to see how that Stryd Footpath responds. And then finally, number three, we have to make that data actionable and we have to personalize your training. So I'm going to be covering three different fatigue analysis cases today. I expect the presentation is going to be around 30 minutes. We're going to have time for questions at the end. So as you have questions throughout the broadcast, put those in the chat, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, and those will be sent to me and I'll be answering those live on stream here. So first, let's jump into the case of looking at this 10K race. So recently in Boulder, we had the Boulder 10K. It's a Memorial Day race. It is at altitude here in Boulder, Colorado. It's a very challenging race, well known, lots of runners. And we're going to be looking at how my footpath changed over the course of the run to see how I fatigued and my personal fatigue patterns. And you'll be able to pick up some strategies you can use to look at your own data. So first, let's take a look at this race here. So it was a 10K race. I was running right around that critical power value, maintaining that even power output. I'd use the race power calculator on Stryd to really get a strong expectation of that power I could output and what kind of finishing time I could expect. And I was able to execute the plan very well, and I had a fantastic race. So that's kind of that second by second view on that Stryd Power Center. And now we're going to be taking a look at the Stryd Footpath tool. And if you're not familiar with this tool, what you can do is you can select one of those runs, and I bring it in here on the timeline. And then I'm viewing my footpath from that side perspective here, so we can turn this reference image to get a sense of what we're looking at. And we can see the footpath for both the left and right foot. And then we can go on the timeline, we can select certain sections of the run, and we can even drag that selection across to see how the footpath changes over the course of the run. So what I've done here to do an apples-to-apples comparison is I'm going to bring this run in on my timeline twice. So I've already selected that run, and now I'm going to select that run a second time. And you can see here this top timeline, that is the solid lines. And this second timeline here, those are the dashed lines. So what I've done here is I've selected a section towards the start of my run, and I'm going to be comparing against a section at the end of my run. And if you've watched the previous live streams, you'll know that typically, when you're running at a very high intensity for a long period of time, if you're kind of in those max or near max effort scenarios, typically you see that footpath shrink. And we do see that footpath shrink a bit from this side perspective here. And that's completely normal. One peculiar thing we'll notice here is that the right side, this blue line, we can see that footpath contracts more on the right side versus the left side. So you can see that difference here on the left foot, it's pretty minor, where on the right foot, it's definitely more significant on seeing how that footpath contracted. So this definitely indicates there were more changes on the right side of the body versus the left side of the body. So I asked myself, why is that? So I've made my comparison, and now the second step is to understand how the Stryd footpath responded. And one thing I noticed when analyzing my data here is with the new Stryd Duo, we have data from both the left and right side of the body. So specifically, we have these 4 metrics: ground contact time balance, leg spring stiffness balance, impact loading rate balance, and vertical oscillation balance. If we look specifically, these 3 have enabled here: the ground contact time, the leg spring stiffness, and the vertical oscillation. We see the left and right sides are pretty even. It's right around that 50-50, 51-49 mark. But we can see that doesn't tell the full story of my run, because we do see that there were more changes on the right side versus the left side of the body. So I zoomed in on the case of the impact loading rate balance. And what we see with the impact loading rate balance is that I had 3% more impact loading rate on the right side versus the left side. And for those of you who are not familiar with the impact loading rate, you can go to blog.stryd.com and search for the impact loading rate on, you can search for this on Google, type in impact loading rate Stryd, and you'll be pulled up to our article here. So impact loading rate is a metric we introduced with the next-gen Stryd, and it is the initial rate of increase in vertical force as the runner contacts the ground with their foot, and it's reported in the units of body weight per second. So that's kind of the longer explanation, but the impact loading rate, you can really just think about it as how much force is being applied to the lower body. And we can see this pattern changes for midfoot strikers versus heel strikers. And it really gives you a good sense of, how you absorb forces as you run faster, as you run downhill, run uphill. And specifically, I believe that higher impact loading rate on the right side definitely caused that change in the footpath on the right side, and it induced more fatigue. So now the big question is, what do I do? How do I make this data actionable? How do I personalize my training? And specifically for myself, I've been recording my own subjective feeling along these runs. I have the objective data from Stryd, the second-by-second data, that's Stryd Footpath. And I also have the subjective data I've been experiencing, I've been recording as part of my runs, as part of my notes. And I definitely do feel there is an increased injury risk on that right side, which aligns with the data. I do want to be mindful that I do not exceed that sustainable load on the right side. I kind of manage that injury risk by making sure I don't run, I don't do, for example, if that impact loading rate on the right side increases, or if I do really hard runs and that stress shoots up specifically on the right side, I know I'm going to have to bring my training load down. So that was case number 1, fatigue analysis number 1, looking at the scenario of a race. So to really understand, those left-right differences, I recommend looking at the footpath, but also looking at the second-by-second data to bring context to the data. So now we're going to be looking at fatigue analysis number 2, and this is a threshold run. And now we're going to start to bring in that concept of a warm-up in. So this is a treadmill run I did, and one thing I noticed by looking at my data is I did 3 reps, kind of a threshold intensity, right around that half marathon intensity. And let me show you the footpath from those runs here. So once again, I have brought this run into the Stryd Footpath Analyzer, and I've duplicated, so I have 2 timelines here. And once again, this top timeline is the solid line for the footpath, and the dashed line is the second timeline. And I was looking here, and I could see pretty major differences across the footpath from that first repetition to that third repetition. And the treadmill is a really great area to analyze your Stryd footpath because all the variables are controlled for. I had the same speed setting on the treadmill. I was running at effectively the same power value, 386 versus 383. But we can see that even when running at the same speed and same intensity, my footpath underwent major changes. So I start to look and say, did this kind of change over the course of a run? Was there a clear trend from the first rep to the second rep to the third rep? And what I discovered is actually there was not a clear trend. because that second rep here I've selected in that top timeline was nearly identical to that third rep I selected in the bottom timeline. So really the outlier here was that first rep where the footpath was much larger. It was changing over the course of that first rep pretty majorly. So I've selected a smaller section of that first rep. I'm able to drag across here. And as you monitor those solid lines, you can see how much that footpath is changing there. And of course, that's normal. You are going to have a bit of the change over the course of a run in any case here, but we can see I did have major changes in that first effort there. So what this led me to start looking at was, and here's a side-by-side comparison of that difference I just talked about, that unstable footpath versus the more stable footpath later in the run, and that's looking at first and third rep on the left side and then the second and third rep on the right side. So this led me to start thinking about, did I warm up properly? Was I properly prepared to run at this high intensity? Should I maybe consider doing some strides or maybe some higher intensity, shorter warm-up reps for more stable footpath from the start? And this is going to vary on a runner by runner basis, where some runners are going to have a very clear warm-up trend, and some runners are just going to jump right into it, where they're going to see that stable footpath right from the jump, right from the start. They're not really going to need that extended warm-up in order to really fall into their ideal stable running form. For me, I do see a pretty clear warm-up trend here. So one thing I'm going to be experimenting with in the future and making changes in my training is incorporating these warm-up repetitions, see if I can stabilize that footpath and go into my workout at a better state next time. So once again, this point, the overarching point here is to look at the run in context. Understand, how that footpath is changing. Is it towards the start of the run? Is it the middle of the run? Is it towards the end of the run? And when you have that information, it is far able to zoom in and understand, what type of changes, what kind of action you should be taking on the data. So now we're going to be looking at a third case, fatigue analysis number 3. And I call this one the cost of not warming up, because this is another threshold run. It's a continuous threshold run. And I was running at that similar intensity I did in that run I just showed. And we can see I wasn't taking any breaks. I didn't have any, there was no repetitions. It was just one continuous threshold run for that same duration. And what I believe I see in this run is a very similar trend. So we can see that run here on the Power Center. And now, of course, we want to open that run up on the Stryd Footpath Analyzer. So once again, I'm taking that similar approach here, looking within a single run. I do believe it's critical to look within a single run when you're starting with Stryd Footpath, because it just makes it so much easier to get those apples to apples comparisons. And especially if you do any treadmill running, it makes it even easier. But if you don't have access to a treadmill, you don't run on a treadmill, that's also fine. Typically, even on your common paths, you're going to be seeing, common surface conditions, common grades, flat grades, most often for a lot of runners. So it's still possible to, get those apples to apples comparisons for outdoor runs. It's very easy to do, as I showed in the race scenario. And I always recommend looking at that run and comparing against itself at the start. Then, for example, if you're running the same path week over week, then you can start to compare those runs against each other and also make those apples to apples comparisons. But back to this run here, we can see there's pretty major differences once again from the first part of this threshold run to the second part of this threshold run. And looking at the second by second data here, here's another case where my warm-up was even worse than the previous run here, where I ran for about 16 minutes here, kind of that easier intensity. And for around 12 minutes, I had to do some tasks. I wasn't, I kind of got distracted from my run before I kind of got into that main section here, where I might have even lost some of my warm-up from this run. And we can see that did have, once again, a impact on the Stryd Footpath, where that footpath never really stabilized over the run here. So I'm going to turn off that bottom timeline. I'm just going to select this top timeline here. I'm going to drag across, and you can really see that footpath never stabilized over the course of a run here because, once again, I don't believe I warmed up properly. And to add some context to this, we can see that impact loading rate value was changing pretty massively over the course of this run here, where that impact loading rate was once again increasing on the right side over the course of a run. So when you pull up that impact loading rate balance, it started with more of that even impact, and we can see in that pink line there was a clear trend downwards. Even though I was maintaining that same power output, the treadmill is set to that same intensity, we can see there's a pretty clear downward trend where I was slowly having more impact on the right side over the course of the run. And I believe that was compensating because and starting to fatigue because I had not warmed up properly. So once again, I came to a similar conclusion for this run as I did for the previous run here, where I do want to make sure I don't take a long break between my warm up and my working session. I want to complete some more of those higher intensity, shorter warm up reps and see if I can get that more stable footpath from the start. And then additionally, another trend I noticed here is that typically when I start running, I have lower cadence values, but as I start to get warmed up, and I notice this across my previous workout I just talked about, analysis number 2 and analysis number 3, where when I'm warmed up, I typically see that cadence value start to increase. So one thing I might want to monitor while I'm running is, in order to know that I'm really warmed up, is see if I'm maintaining those higher cadence values, and be mindful of that as a form cue when I'm running, to keep that cadence kind of higher, and that can help me reach that warm up point faster. So specifically, I will open up that cadence value, and another cool trick we can do, of course, on the Power Center to see how metrics change is just to grab a section of that run and then drag across. So we can see that update, and we can see that cadence value did bump up a bit from kind of that lower point here around 158, and towards that second part of the run, I'm getting to that 159 mark. So we do see that cadence increases a bit on the second part of the run, and that's something I want to be mindful of to keep that high turnover in order to kind of reach that more performance state. So once again, this is all made possible by Stryd Duo. So if you have a next-gen Stryd pod, you can add one additional next-gen Stryd pod, pair those together in the Stryd mobile app, and create Stryd Duo. And for those of you who are already running a Stryd Duo today, you just need the Stryd membership. Once you have the Stryd membership, you can start analyzing that footpath data. So, two great cases to start analyzing your Stryd footpath data. And if you want to embark on your journey today, if you do want to get that second next-gen Stryd or purchase Stryd Duo, you can head over to stryd.com/store. We have some really great purchasing options, whether you need 2 next-gen Stryd pods or just a single next-gen Stryd pod to get started. I did want to tease something. We have a new release coming soon, so stay tuned. Next week, we're going to have a release that makes it even easier to get your Stryd footpath data. We think this is going to be a incredible feature release. I don't want to say too much now. I just kind of want to tease it, but definitely subscribe to the Stryd YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram, Stryd Running. Join the Stryd community on Facebook, and then you'll be receiving alerts for when we release that new feature. And once again, this is going to make it easier to get your Stryd footpath data and analyze that data. So definitely stay tuned for that and follow Stryd for more news on that release. So now we've had some questions. Thanks everyone for joining us and asking those questions. So we're going to be answering some questions here. So we have a question from Scott that says, does Stryd have the ability to recommend drills or workouts based on data from your Stryd footpath? So to answer this, right now for drills, if you grab a training plan from the Stryd mobile app, we are going to have those drill recommendations. If you grab that training plan from 5K to marathon, we do have some drills that are going to be included as part of the training plan. We recommend incorporating those into the routine and following this analysis process I just talked about and seeing if those drills lead to those advantageous changes in your footpath. They help you get warmed up, they help you become more performant. And that is the initial step here. Where we want to be going in the footpath is we do want to, in the future, is we do want to start giving those recommendations to help guide the runner to achieve those higher performing footpaths, lead to those advantageous changes. So definitely stay tuned on that aspect. We will be having more educational material coming soon, so keep an eye on the newsletter. We're going to be launching a new newsletter at stryd.com in the upcoming weeks. They're going to be giving those recommendations on how to make adjustments to your training to lead to some of those advantageous changes in the footpath. So thanks for your question, Scott, and stay tuned. We're going to have some really incredible things coming there. We have a question from Caesar saying, how significant are the differences for one to be alert? How much real control does one have over the right or left stride? Feels like it is what it is. And that's a great question, Caesar. And that has definitely been my approach, where for managing that higher impact loading rate on the right versus left side and seeing that those changes, those impact loading rates are higher on the right side, I want to be mindful and use that to manage injury risk rather than make changes, because I believe as I put more miles in, I put more high intensity training in, put more quality training as I will be strengthening on both the right and left side. I will be seeing that footpath change just as a result of performance improving over time. So I'm not making any conscious changes. I'm just using that data to help me manage the injury risk, because the biggest thing that will derail my training is, for example, getting injured. And if I can stay healthy and be mindful and just manage that training load on the right versus left side, then I'm going to be able to stay healthy and continue to increase my performance. And I believe the issue may largely resolve itself over time. A comment from Scott saying, it seems like it would be more beneficial for a coach or someone who really understands what to look for. And great comment there, Scott. What we also have, we have another major release coming up on the coaching side, where we're going to be educating coaches and on how to use the Stryd Footpath data, educate the exercise physiologists on how to use this data and the PTs on how to use this data. And we want to start enabling them to produce this, this critical information and push it out there in the Stryd community so that, they can increase their profile, and it can also help inform runners. So we are going to be having coaching certifications on this, and also helping increase the overall knowledge base on this, so that that can filter down to the runners. Another comment from Caesar here saying, is it the case that a recommendation would be you need a physio plan to even out both footpaths and work in your strength exercises? And the answer to that is that could definitely be a possibility. Right now we do recommend, as I mentioned, those drills as part of the Stryd training plan, but we do want to also look at paths such as releasing specific plans to help possibly shrink those differences between left and right, manage single-sided strengthening exercises. Those are all possibilities we're looking at, so definitely stay tuned for information on that. We have a comment from Diane Hood. Thank you for joining, Diane. Yes, I believe having an evaluation is very beneficial, so you can know what to work on with regard to mobility, stability, and strength. This is my background, so I am a bit biased. And Diane is part of our Stryd coaching program, and she's taking part in a lot of what we have going on the Stryd coaching side. So, that's the kind of path we're taking. Help educate the coaches, get them the tools so they can start applying their unique and expertise to this, and start publishing that knowledge to Stryders, and help them to achieve what they want to achieve. And keep asking questions here. Type those in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Of course, subscribe to the channel, and get notifications when we go live in the future. We have a comment from Martin saying, is there a way to get Stryd to take heat into account when planning a run? It feels very depressive to run during the summer here in Dubai when keeping to my power goal feels close to impossible. And yeah, we do have a presentation on this. I recommend to scroll through our live videos on how to manage heat and humidity. We did a live presentation on this towards the end of last year. That's going to be able to go very deep into detail on how to manage heat and humidity as the seasons change. There are some great features in Stryd right now to manage heat and humidity as the seasons change, such as the Stryd Apple Watch app does have an environmentally adjusted power value. And how that works is it looks at your running performance from the last 90 days as part of that power duration curve. And if you're running in an environment that is different than the conditions you've established as part of that power duration curve, it's going to adjust your power value. So for example, if I establish my power duration curve in very cool conditions, I've been running a lot on the treadmill and air conditioned conditions here, and then I go outside and it's 90 degrees outside, I'm not going to be able to sustain that same power. But if I was looking at that environmentally adjusted power, that's going to adjust that value down. So I'm running at that lower power value at a more manageable intensity so that I'm able to adapt as the seasons change. And once I establish that new power duration curve, I'm adapted to those hot and humid conditions. The environmental adjustment's not going to be as necessary. It's going to be much smaller if there's any at all. So that's one option there. So look at those environmentally adjusted power values available for both the Stryd app on Apple Watch and the Stryd Zones data field on the latest version for kind of those higher memory, higher feature Garmin watches. So I recommend to check out those features on both of those platforms. And even if you're using another watch, such as a Suunto watch, Polar watch, etc., where we can't provide those environmentally adjusted power values, we still have some fantastic strategies on how to adjust your power targets for those runs. And I definitely recommend to check out that adjusting for heat and humidity. Go to that live stream tab on the Stryd YouTube channel, and you're going to find a webinar on that where I cover how to do those adjustments there. So we have a question from Serena that says, are there any plans to compose workouts based on pace instead of power percentage? And right now, all of our workout builder, our training plans are based on the power. And our goal here and our plan here is to make it easier to establish that critical power, understand how those power values translate and convert to pace values so that you can build those training plans based on power. Ultimately, you do want to be running based on power because power can be the guide when you're running over hills, when you're running into the wind, where you can't do the same thing with pace. So we want to make it easier, and we have had a lot of recent feature updates to make it easier to establish that critical power so you can just purely run based on power, so you always have that perfect pacing value in any conditions. We have a comment from Caesar that says, thanks team for taking questions. I've been a user of Stryd for 1+ year, and it's really my go-to for training. Thank you, Caesar. I love it. I love your engagement here, asking questions, and I'm glad you've been getting great use out of it, and for joining the live stream. And a comment from Diane saying, wow, that adjustment feature for the power duration curve is fantastic. Much appreciated. And yeah, that the next gen Stryd pod is also capturing those heat and humidity values in real time as you're running. And we're going to be bringing that more into the Stryd ecosystem in the future because we really think there's huge potential there to be making those environmental adjustments so that runners can be performant in any conditions. So we definitely have a lot more coming there as well. So that's all the questions we have. Once again, if you are interested in getting set up with Stryd Duo, Stryd Footpath, head over to stryd.com/store. If you don't have the next gen Stryd yet, we have a great Stryd Duo plus membership bundle. If you already have the next gen Stryd, you can purchase that next gen Stryd plus membership bundle and get running with Stryd Duo. We have a lot of great purchasing options in order to start collecting this data and start crushing that fatigue, nailing your warmups and having your best run yet. That's all I have for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'll see you next time here as part of a Stryd live stream.